Welcome, everybody, and greetings. This is Healthcare Leadership Live. My name is Mike Lyons. I'm your host. And as always, we're here to bring you actionable tips for healthcare leaders to help you run your clinics better and be better leaders. And today's guest is going to help us do that. It is Philip Isham. He is a longtime ophthalmology leader. He's a consultant in the ophthalmology world, and he is the principal at ECP Advisor Group. So welcome, Philip, to the show.
Thank you, Mike. Glad to join you. I appreciate I'm very privileged and honored to be asked to join your show. You've got an ongoing group of what seems to be I know some of them, experts here to come on and share thoughts. So thank you for having me.
Well, I only get the best people for my show. So you are just one in a long stream of excellent guests. And so, yeah, thanks for being on. I'm honored too. So, I think what would be good to start out with is I'd love for you to share a little bit about what you do and also why do you do it?
Good question on the last one there. So yes, I would say more like kind of general strategic consultant in eye care. Been in healthcare for 30 years, been in eye care for 20 plus, and started out, which probably most of the audience would probably remember this offering back in the day. It was called the Allergan Access Eye Care Business Advisor Group, which Allergan offered up as a value-added service to all the ophthalmology and optometry and ASC owner world, which was Allergan's customers, but offered up this business consulting services and a repository of tools, practice management tools, which was called Allergan Access. And then the business consultants were eye care business advisors. So I led that group for 10 years. And that really probably was I'd say probably the main aspect that allowed me to really get to know a lot of the practices across the United States, build a lot of really strong relationships that I really I love and appreciate today. But also, helped really build out a good perspective of what's this eye care business all about, what it takes to run a successful business from both the physician standpoint, from the administrator standpoint, staff, clinical, operational. And then I later on put my own shingle out after, unfortunately, that great service went away. Allergan was bought, and so that service went away, and I put out my own shingle and continued to do strategic consulting, both practice management, leadership, financial aspects, helping practices, and all those areas. Physicians, they're really fantastic. They're very fantastic clinicians. They're great surgeons. But a lot of times they're not taught the business acumen component in terms of running their business. And, they wear many hats. They wear the hat of the clinician and surgeon. They also wear the hat of a business owner. And they also wear the hat of being a leader in their organization, along with other hats. So anyway, I put my own shingle out to try to continue to help practices in that way. And I currently serve with a lot of practices and partner with them, either as like a fractional CEO, or working on long-term major projects to help them either grow, business development, enhance their efficiencies, et cetera.
Okay. Yeah, as you were talking, it just reminded me that, clinical healthcare, at least in the private practice setting, it's one of those weird businesses, and I'm not sure there's another business like it, maybe law, where, the owner is the chief producer. They are the engine of production for the business, mm-hmm. and they own the business and they run the business, and it's a weird cocktail of responsibilities.
It is. It's that time commodity component, right? The rainmakers, so to speak, the producers, and so times not producing is at least from a standpoint of a critical piece of what they do, meaning leading their teams, leading their business. On the strategic side, they don't really get paid for that. But at the same time, it's a critical piece that they must do. The lane that their practice and business is going to be in the long term, the strategic planning component, And of course, the leadership component to help navigate that entity, their operations, their business down the pathway to get them to that endpoint that they've predetermined is what they would like that practice or that business to look like.
Do you find that physicians tend to wait too long before engaging maybe someone like you or a professional management person so they can pull back from, not that they should ever pull back completely right from strategic thought, but that they can pull back from day-to-day stuff and get advice? Do you find that they tend to wait too long before they do that?
I do. I would say probably it's more of a fact that it's a little bit of, I'll call it a blind spot. So think about the nature of physicians, specifically surgeons, and of course ophthalmologists are surgeons. And in fact, they're microsurgeons, right? They work on in a very small part of the anatomy, and they're really, really good surgeons. And they also love a controlled environment. And all of them have been very, very high producers or very high level in their schooling and so forth. But by nature of being microsurgeons, it's hard. It's a difficult thing for them to lift their viewpoint and their horizon to a more long-term perspective. The myopia that they deal with as a nature of their surgery tends to also kind of carry over into how they run their business. And so, yeah, I do think there's value. Of course, that sounds biased, and I'm, obviously not looking necessarily for job security here, but there is, I think it's good to have accountability, an outside party to help with the discipline of raising up our perspective and looking long term for those physicians, looking long term at their business, because it's a real easy default to kind of stick with the day-to-day and the tactical.
Yeah, and I've definitely seen that kind of behavior where a physician will say, you know what, I'm done with this technician. They're not doing it for me. We need to send them down the road, Yeah. And that kind of like laser focus in the moment, right? And so what you said is just a really cool analogy, especially for the ophthalmology world, is that kind of focus.
Yeah, well, think about surgeons, and if any are listening, I mean, if we were having a discussion with one right now, I would say the same thing. Yeah. But it's kind of like to cut is to cure, and so the very fast approach there to let's take care of it right now makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense, but that's not always the same solution or application to solve an issue as to do it immediately. Sometimes the crock pot's better than the microwave in terms of finding the solution or baking the cake or whatever analogy we want to talk about here, a metaphor. And that's the reason why these ophthalmology fiduciary owners and leaders and both surgeons and clinicians, they surround themselves with a very strong administrative group, right? And both on who do tactical execution, the staff level, and then the more strategic kind of roles, the directors and the C-suite and so forth. And they invest a lot of money in their practice to have those individuals who have maybe perhaps a little more business acumen, and that's their focus, is to keep focused on the business. That doesn't mean, though, even though you have strong individuals like that the physician, the clinician, and surgical leader, the owner, can abdicate their role as leaders and owners as well.
I was talking to a practice not that long ago, and it struck me that they probably have gone past that moment of where they probably need to engage, and they indicated to me that they had maybe had some bad engagements with professional leaders, and so they maybe were burned a little bit. But
with consultants, with consultants,
like fractional people, consultants, and that can happen, I imagine, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
No one here in this conversation, actually, but
I've made mistakes in the bachelor's. I'll admit to it, no doubt.
And so I wonder is there every practice is different, but is there a indicator, maybe 2 physicians, 3 physicians, where they really should start to look at outside help, and what kind of help might that be? I don't know. Is there some kind of guideposts that you might share to say, hey, you really should have a right hand when you get to this point?
Yeah, I'd say there's a few. They'll probably resonate with you, with HR being your, kind of your go-to lane for you. I'd say one of the key things is the morale and the culture of the organization. You start seeing frustration amongst your people, your team members, those who are around you, and those who you've put in place to help you move forward. When a high level of frustration is there, levels of turnover at key position, key functional areas, that's a key signal right there that perhaps there's not all as well in the household. I'd also say, especially when there's a multi-owner type of businesses and practices, when there's discontent or misalignment among the owners, is a real key one. And usually that comes down to a number of different things: poor communication amongst the owners, governance or decision making that's made by the owners by proximity versus trying to make sure everybody's in who has the right to make decisions. I mean, all the owners. Unilateral decisions are made because of proximity to maybe the CEO, whoever's the management, local management right there in the building that I'm in. I happen to see something needs to be addressed, and so when there's misalignment and there's unilateral decisions and things like that, that causes frustration for the management team. It certainly causes frustration among the co-owners, and so you start seeing those things start coming into play. Those are signs and symptoms.
Okay, sure. Those are great. Those are super practical. So we've talked a little bit about that the physician can never fully pull back, and so one thing I have seen is the importance of the providers and the physicians to see themselves as leaders in the clinic day to day, not just in strategic decisions, behind the scenes, but when it comes to managing the staff. And this again is another unique difference, I think, in clinical healthcare, where you have that producer who is working side by side with the employees, yet they are not usually, or in a lot of practices, they're not the direct manager of those people. And so that's a weird dynamic. What is your take on how the physicians can, the importance of their role as leaders and how they can maximize that, optimize it?
Yeah, I think there's a misunderstanding around the providers and specifically for, let's say, owner physicians and non-owner physicians. Obviously there's an expectation the owner physicians are going to be leaders, and let's define leadership real quick. I'm just level set for you and me and the audience. Leadership is influence. It can be good influence or bad influence, but leadership is influence. So yes, those providers have influence, and so there's an expectation that the owner providers have influence because they're owners. But what I see a lot of associates and non-owner providers lack of understanding is that they too are leaders, and they have a role in influencing the clinical team around them and everyone because of the position they have of being a clinician, a surgeon, a provider. They usually are leading or have a significant amount of influence, if not the main impact of influence amongst the leadership team, amongst the clinical team or surgical team. And I don't think they fully understand that and appreciate that. Again, they think, well, I'm not an owner, so I'm not the leader of the group, but that's not really true. And so first of all, providing an increased visibility and awareness probably could be a blind spot, or just flat out just not a point of skill development and training for that provider to help them understand that they do have influence, that there really is an expectation amongst the clinical team or surgical team that what you say, Dr. Provider, is an important part of the direction we're going to go as a team, whether it's a pod or whether it's a office location team or what have you. They're going to be looking to the providers, the non-owner providers as well, for how they are consistent in decisions being made, consistent in behaviors that are exhibited, consistent in alignment of the culture of the organization that we all belong to, and the core values, all of those different things. How we treat patients, how we deliver service is everything in terms of our operational approach. Is it circled around me as the provider, or do we really walk the talk and say we're patient focused.
Mm.
So all of those things are demonstrated in the leadership role modeling that's done by the provider, owner or non-owner provider.
Mm.
And so I don't think a lot of providers really appreciate the level of influence that they have, or they say, hey, you're the business people, or that's the owner, and that's not my role and responsibility. And I'd argue, yes, it is. If you're part of the team, especially if you're part of the provider team, but any member of the team, you are a leader and influencer. And people around you will follow, and you can either be a driver of good groupthink or bad groupthink.
This show is sponsored by Seasoned Advice HR Services, where I help clinical healthcare businesses to make more money and save more money by hiring better, retaining better, and reducing your HR risk. If you would like an HR assessment or ongoing HR support, please reach out to me at seasoned-advice.com. Well, that makes me wonder a little bit about your comments just now. Made me think about physician recruitment and finding the right fit for the practice. What tips do you have for a physician who's looking to maybe add another provider to their practice, or like a CEO that's wanting to grow? And I know it's not exactly easy to find ophthalmologists, walking around on the street. And so, how do you, from that limited supply, make sure that you get someone who is going to be a great fit in your practice?
Yeah, well, first of all, having clarity around your own mission, vision, values of your own organization, understanding those very clearly, and they're not just talk, but it's actual look and integrated, and it is who you are as a culture, individually and organizationally, I think is critical. So seeking, I use a phrase quite a bit when I'm interacting with clients, especially individuals, but then when we talk to individuals to make the corporate and collective dialogue, it's know thyself. So individual, know thyself, and then organization, know thyself. And so fully understanding and knowing thyself, then it's going to make it that much more obvious, clear, and I think easier to then identify someone that's going to be the right fit. We know what the seat is on the bus that we need, a surgeon, a subspecialist, whatever, the functional role. We just want to make sure we put the right person in the right seat. And again, the knowing thyself from a mission, vision, values, cultural standpoint is critical. And then making sure that we have someone that's going to be like-minded, like-hearted, that we identify. But I think we say that for every team member, not just the providers, not just the physician recruitment. So that stands across the entire board. I think what's important for the legacy provider or the group that's looking to recruit a new provider is that there's going to be a commitment to mentor that provider. One of the things I think I see that's a big gap in recruitment is, hey, this young man, this young woman, they went through residency and fellowship, and they're sharp, and we compensation, all those things we align on. But one thing that I see that typically is left off, because a lot of our legacy doctors who are out there now, who are mid to late career, they came on board and they didn't really have a lot of mentors. They just rolled up their sleeves, did it themselves, sweat equity, learned it all, business acumen, all that. And the group coming out now, the generation coming out now, it's not that they can't do that, but they're looking for mentors. They're looking for people who can really pour into them. So you can get the right person, the right cultural fit, and so forth. But I think what I would talk to the hiring provider group and organizations and practices is to really be intentional and proactive to mentor and lead and help develop the providers that you're recruiting, so that they can be better businessmen and women. So they can be better surgeons, better clinicians, but better leaders in the organization. Mm-hmm. Understand communication styles, temperaments, understand organizational development. Those things are never taught on. And you, as a legacy provider, and including your C-suite, you've got all kinds of years of experience doing that because you've learned it. So help pour into those young men and women that you're recruiting to get them up to speed from those other skill standpoints.
Yeah, I love that. We often give short shrift to onboarding and helping people adjust from one thing to the next. Whether it's a front desk employee or a physician, and it's probably it's thought of even less at the provider level, because you think, well, you've been through this training, you've been through fellowship, and who am I to tell you how to be? And we're just going to wait for some problem to come up, and then by then, it's a much bigger problem than it should be.
Yeah, I emphasize proactivity versus reactivity in almost everything in my interactions with practices and with groups and individuals. It's easier said than done, especially at the practices, even for the management and for the physicians. Everyone is used to putting out fires and so forth, and it's back to that micro versus macro perspective we talked earlier. So if we step back and look in a horizon and what are the things that we want to be working towards? So if we know what we want to be when we grow up individually and organizationally and work backwards from there, then we know the steps we need to take in order to achieve that strategic vision or endpoint that we talked about. And so once we have done that and identified those interim steps to get there, then we can proactively do things to strive for those steps. We're always going to have the reactive component there for us, the putting out the fires and so forth. The question is, how much of my time am I spending on proactivity versus reactivity? And I try to get leaders, physicians, clinicians, surgeons, leaders, and C-suite, and the business operational team, management team, and leaders to change the ratio of their proactivity and reactivity to be at least 50-50 proactivity and 50% reactivity. They tend to be really heavily slanted toward reactivity versus proactivity. And very rarely does proactivity take place in a daily activity or a day's time organizational standpoint, or much less a monthly. So that takes intentionality too, to be proactive. So yeah, I think proactivity and focal point in terms of application here on whatever we're talking about.
Yeah.
Leadership, influence, mentorship by the providers, that's a key piece.
We had a comment from Robin. She said, "This is a great topic." Thank you for that validation, Robin. I appreciate it. I agree. I agree. I think it is so important that we talk about leadership and we talk about proactivity, and we talk about how to make sure that physicians are engaged, not just in the practice of medicine, but in running their business. And you're going to be more successful. Imagine that if you put some thought into where you're going.
And let me just make a comment here, because there are administrators and managers that are maybe on the podcast and listening, or may listen to the recording later on. You can do a lot of things to help your providers, your clinicians and surgeons be better leaders through your communication with them. A lot of times the physician leaders, they just don't realize what is flowing downhill. They'll say, do this and do this and do this and do this and help me with this, and can you get this done? Can you get this done? And so what they have failed to do is prioritize for you, because your time and your focus as the business leaders that they've hired to keep an eye on the business, they failed to prioritize for you and help you in prioritization. So I encourage administrators, I say this to no matter what the level, to your direct supervisor, or for the managers and administrators and C-suite who talking to the business owners and physician leaders, to come back and communicate in a very humble and very gentle, kind way. It's all about delivery, but saying, you have provided all these different things that you want to get accomplished, and I understand. I need your help in prioritizing what's most important, because I can't do them all. We as a team can't do them all, so we need your help in prioritizing that. And I think that's a very healthy discussion to have, not only from a standpoint of maximizing resource deployment, meaning time, people, money, but to help the physician leader appreciate that they're not working in a vacuum, especially when it comes to leading the organization. Remember, sometimes they're thinking they're just like in the operating room, and that's a very controlled environment, and they can control the environment, and that's a different environment than a business organizational environment. So I encourage administrators, I encourage, the leaders of the business who the physicians have hired and brought on and made part of the team to look over the business, to have that level of communication, and inform and just encourage your business leaders to help with the prioritization process. It's very important.
Yeah, that's super, super important, especially when you have people who are being reactive and we got to do this and we got to do that. And what's most important right now?
And a lot of time the physician owners, they came in with 5 things yesterday and told you they'd like to have done. Then today they've come in with another 5 things and forgot about the 5 things they told you about yesterday. And so, that's just good communication. It's just good interpersonal interactivity.
I'm thinking a little bit now about multi-physician groups where providers have different motivations. You may have the one who's like ready to kind of sail off, and then you've got the young one, like you said, who's needing mentoring and has a lot of ideas. Maybe they're wanting to be proactive and reactive, and there's different intentions and stuff, and maybe these don't always come out during the hiring process. Maybe they come out later. I mean, what kind of problems have you seen when physicians are not on the same page, and how can clinics overcome some of those challenges?
Yeah, I don't know if the clinics can overcome those challenges, because the last thing we want to do is have these back channel communications that take place amongst the varying individuals and their respective biases and prejudices and motivations and the things they want to get done. That's a recipe for a lot of disaster, quite frankly. So it all stems from really the individuals who have varying or differing perspectives and motivations to come together and talk through those and acknowledge them. I mean, a lot of times when I'm doing strategic retreats or the getaways, and that's one of the main desires that I have coming out of those retreats, is that we uncover, peel back the onion, what are the true motivations that each provider owner has, and where do we have alignment and where do we have misalignment? And let's dialogue on those and discuss those, because your alignment or misalignment is going to cascade down throughout the whole organization. So you might need to be aware of that. So we spend time doing that. But so again, I would encourage even those, on the team that are part of the team, even though they're not the owners, to have bold, courageous, humble conversations. Everything is delivered in humility, and hopefully things are received in humility by the physician owners, because, by the way, you guys are their top resource. You're their top valuable aspect. The pearl of their organization is you, the people that they have on the team. So hopefully they understand that when someone has the courage to come and talk to them, that they understand the boldness and courage it took to approach them, and therefore they have that humility to hear what you guys have to say relative to that. But the point is, alignment and misalignment has to be addressed by the group, and so by the fiduciaries, by the owners, and then there needs to be an understanding. If that hasn't taken place, then bring the symptoms up to the providers and say, we have a click, or we have some disjointedness going on over here. We have a group over here with this provider and their pod and team, and they're going in this direction. And we have another pod and team over here with this provider, and they're going in that direction. We're not rowing in the same direction according to either our mission, vision, values, or according to what we determine as being a critical strategic imperative, or what have you. I think bringing that to light, meaning bringing the symptoms of the misalignment to light, then will help shine the issue on being the fact that the owners or the providers are not aligned. And that has to be what it needs to be addressed. So
Mhm.
it's a hard one. It's a hard one for sure.
I can imagine that the vast majority of clinical businesses out there would benefit and have not done the kind of exercise that you just talked about.
It's quite common. And then back to maybe a little more specific answer to your question. You're going to have differences. The older provider has done it, been there, done that. They're a little more stable financially. I've already put a lot of money into the practice. They don't want to buy new shiny toys or less likely to. And the young ones coming out, I want this technology, that technology, and I'm willing to spend more money. And if I do make a bad decision, I've got more years to make up for that mistake. And so just talking those out, those differing seasons of life and those variables, and there's compromise there. And especially when the older one's like, okay, I want to encourage this younger provider, this younger associate. I want to encourage them. That's the future of this legacy practice that I've started or we've started. So I want to encourage that. But at the same time, it may be a different cadence than that young provider wants to have, because if we do invest in these dollars here, that's less distributions that are paid out to us this year or the next 2 years or whatever the case may be. So how informing that new associate that we want to be cutting edge and we want to have the latest and greatest, but we're going to perform a due diligence on that. We're going to do a feasibility analysis on that and see what it takes to get to a break-even point or a return on investment. And that's part of the mentoring, but it helps to come together and say, we all agree on these core components. We want to grow, we want to be cutting edge, all the things that make us who we are. But we may not be moving as fast as you'd like to move because we want to do our due diligence first. We want to see what it's going to take for us to, get to a point where we're really doing well. Maybe we're starting a new service line or enhancing a service line. What does that look like? What kind of operational changes do we need to make? So there's a lot that goes into just making a decision and let's go do that. And teaching that young person that might bring them along a little more. It also helps the older person who already may be a little hesitant to spend money right away. It satisfies that component for them because they've done the due diligence, and maybe they learn something about how fast it might take to get a new service line underway. And hey, it's not as long as I thought, or hey, it's more profitable than I figured. We could get it done earlier, and so we don't take as big of a hit on this distributions this year. That kind of thing.
Well, I feel like we could probably talk for another 30 minutes to an hour, but I always like to leave the listener wanting more. So I think I'm going to do that.
Time has flown by, that's for sure.
Yeah. So, we've talked about culture, we've talked about physician leadership, and these are big issues that are strategically vital to a ophthalmology practice or any healthcare business, really. And so, and I've enjoyed your expertise, Philip, so much. How can people get in touch with you if they want to tap into your knowledge further?
Well, I think probably certainly on LinkedIn. I don't have a website. I'm on LinkedIn. Okay. My information there is my cell number and my email is on LinkedIn there. So Philip Isham, you can see my name. I think it's tagged there on the screen. So yeah, happy to help out. I am not looking for a whole bunch of clients or anything like that, but I'm happy to help answer questions and maybe I also have a whole lot of peers and colleagues that do a lot of different things that, as we talk or I talk to somebody here from this audience and they have a particular need, I can also point you to folks who might be able to help you with that specific need if it's something I'm not able to help out with. So, but happy to help. I've been in the industry a long time, and my goal is just to continue to give back and help it. Eye care is a great business. Our physician owners are great entrepreneurs. They're very sharp individuals. We got great business people that work for them. And, we just want to continue to ensure that we do the best things for the patients, but also have very viable businesses. And the only way we're going to do great things for the patients is if our businesses are very strong and viable. And all we can do is keep working hard and learn from each other. And that's what I hope we do, is learn from one another.
Well, you have helped us do just that here today, Philip. So thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
So this show is all about helping clinical healthcare businesses get better, help the leaders learn how to be better leaders, and be better strategic thinkers. And today was a great example of that. If you liked the content today, please follow me on LinkedIn, follow the show on whatever podcast platform you subscribe to such things on. And I'm going to keep bringing you awesome guests like Philip. We've got a whole bunch of people in the pipeline, and I'm so excited to bring them on to the show. With that, thanks for listening. Now go out there and lead with confidence.